Chapter 16. He Wants What He Can't Have. The roar of Manhattan was finally fading into the rearview mirror, replaced by the rhythmic thrum of the tires against the Long Island Expressway. Beside me, Maya was silent, her head resting against the leather headrest, her eyes closed. She looked exhausted, the events of the last 24 hours etched into the faint shadows under her eyes. I kept one hand on the steering wheel of the Aston Martin. I dismissed the driver for this trip. I wanted no witnesses to what happened next, and the other on her thigh. It was a possessive, grounding touch. I needed to feel the heat of her through the fabric of her skirt to convince myself that she was actually there, that the board meeting hadn't been a fever dream. We had won. Henderson was in a legal chokehold, Evelyn Sterling was a memory, and Vane Global was hemorrhaging value. By all accounts, I should have been celebratory. I should have been planning the next phase of the Horizon rollout. But all I could think about was the way Maya had looked at me when I told her I loved her. There had been relief, yes. There had been passion, but there had also been a flicker of something else. A shadow of the girl who had walked into my gala with a debt she couldn't pay. She had said the words back to me, but as the city's skyline disappeared behind us, a dark, gnawing thought took root in my mind. I had her in my car. I had her in my life. I had her in my bed, but did I have all of her? Or did she still look at me and see the man who had the power to sign away her father's life? "You're driving too fast," Maya whispered, her eyes still closed. I looked at the speedometer. I was doing 90. I eased off the gas, my jaw tightening. I want to be there. I want the city to be 100 miles away. The city is just a place, Alexander. The problems come with us. She opened her eyes, turning her head to look at me. The afternoon sun caught the gold in her irises. "What's wrong? You've been a wall of tension since we left the bridge." "Nothing is wrong. Everything is exactly as it should be." "Liar." She reached over and placed her hand over mine on her thigh. Her touch was soft, but it felt like a brand. "You're thinking about the board. You're thinking about the optics Evelyn mentioned." "I don't give a damn about the optics," I growled, my grip on the wheel tightening. "I care about the fact that even when I'm holding you, I feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I feel like you're waiting for me to pull out a contract and remind you of the locked-in clause." Maya was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the wind rushing past the car. "The clause is gone, Alexander. You crossed it out." "I crossed out the ink. I didn't cross out the history." I pulled the car onto a side road, the trees beginning to thicken as we approached the coast. "I want what I can't have, Maya. I want the version of you that met me before the takeover. I want the version of you that doesn't have a reason to doubt my every move." "You can't have the past," she said, her voice dropping to a low, melodic vibration. "But you have the present, and the present is me, sitting in this car, going to a house in the Hamptons with a man who risked his entire empire for me. Isn't that enough?" In my world, enough is a word for people who have stopped climbing. I turned into the long, winding driveway of the Blackwood estate in Montauk. It wasn't the typical Hamptons mansion. It wasn't a sprawling white box meant for parties. It was a fortress of gray stone and weathered wood, perched on the edge of a jagged cliff overlooking the Atlantic. It was isolated, brutal, and beautiful, just like me. I stopped the car in front of the heavy oak doors and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves against the rocks below. I looked at Maya. She was staring up at the house, her expression unreadable. "Welcome to the end of the world," I said. "It doesn't look like the end, she whispered. It looks like a beginning. Maya POV. The house smelled of salt air and expensive cedar. Inside, it was all open spaces and floor-to-ceiling glass, the gray Atlantic filling every frame. It was a house built for a man who wanted to see the storm coming. Alexander didn't call for the staff. He'd sent them away, just as he'd sent away the driver and the guards. For the first time since the gala, we were truly alone. No Marcus, no phones, no security, just the two of us and the ocean. He carried our bags up to the master suite. It was a vast room with a fireplace made of river stone and a bed that looked like it belonged to a medieval king. He set the bags down and walked to the window, staring out at the horizon. I stood in the doorway, watching him. He looked different here. The charcoal suit looked out of place against the raw, wild beauty of the coast. He looked like a man who was trying to command the sea to stand still, and for the first time, he was realizing he couldn't. "You're doing it again," I said, walking toward him. "Doing what?" "Measuring, calculating. You're trying to figure out how to own this weekend." I stopped behind him, sliding my arms around his waist. I pressed my face against the fine wool of his blazer. "Alexander, stop. The war is 40 miles away. Just be here with me." He turned in my arms, his hands coming up to cup my face. His eyes were stormy, mirroring the water outside. "I don't know how to just be, Maya. I've spent my life wanting more. More power, more money, more control. And now, I want you in a way that makes all of that look like nothing. It's a hunger I can't satisfy, no matter how close I get to you." He leaned down, his mouth hovering just an inch from mine. "I want what I can't have. I want your total, unadulterated trust. I want you to look at me and not see the man who broke your world." "I don't see that man anymore," I whispered, my breath hitching. "I see the man who fixed it." He didn't wait for another word. He claimed my mouth with a ferocity that took my breath away. It wasn't the gentle, protective kiss from the office. This was a desperate, primal demand. He backed me up until I hit the stone fireplace, his hands tangling in my hair, his body pinning me against the cool rock. "Alexander." I gasped into the kiss. "Tell me you're mine," he growled against my lips. "Not because of a contract, not because of a debt. Say it because it's the only truth left." "I'm yours," I said, my voice shaking with the intensity of it. "I'm yours because I love you. I'm yours because you're the only person who sees me." He groaned, a deep, guttural sound, and swept me up into his arms. He carried me to the bed, the afternoon sun casting long, orange shadows across the sheets. As he laid me down, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes again, the fear of a man who has finally found the one thing he can't afford to lose. I reached up and pulled him down to me, my hands finding the buttons of his shirt. This wasn't just about desire. This was a battle for the soul of our relationship. He wanted to own me, and I wanted to free him from the need to own anything. Alexander POV. The silk of her dress was a barrier I couldn't wait to remove. I moved over her with a desperate energy, my mouth finding every inch of her skin, her neck, the hollow of her throat, the curve of her shoulder. I wanted to mark her. I wanted to leave a trail of fire that would burn away every other man she'd ever known, every other life she'd ever lived. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw the reflection of my own obsession. She was giving me everything. Her body, her voice, her heat. But the one thing I wanted, that absolute, blind trust, was something she couldn't give. Not yet. Not while the shadow of the Blackwood name still hung over her father's legacy. It was the ultimate irony. I had billions of dollars, I had the power to move markets, and I was being brought to my knees by a woman's hesitation. "Alexander, look at me," she whispered, her fingers cupping my jaw. I looked. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of love and a terrifyingly clear-eyed understanding of who I was. "You don't have to conquer me," she said softly. "You've already won. Now you just have to learn how to keep me." "And how do I do that?" I asked, my voice a ragged whisper. "By letting go." She pulled me down, her mouth meeting mine in a kiss that was slow, deep, and filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. It was a surrender, but not the kind I was used to. It was a surrender of the spirit. As we moved together, the sound of the ocean below blending with the rhythm of our breathing, the fire of Act II began to burn in earnest. But it wasn't the fire of destruction. It was the fire of a forge. I held her as if she were made of glass, my movements careful, deliberate. I wanted to show her that I could be gentle. I wanted to show her that my hands were capable of more than just taking. In the heat of the moment, the CEO vanished. The billionaire disappeared. There was only a man and a woman, locked together in a glass house at the end of the world, trying to find a way to be whole. But even as I felt her peek beneath me, her body arching and her voice calling my name, I felt the pull of the world outside. The silence of the Hamptons was a lie. The phones would ring again. The board would return. Vane would strike. I pulled her closer, my face buried in her hair. I wanted what I couldn't have. I wanted this moment to last forever. I wanted the clock to stop and the world to vanish. But the sun was already setting, and the shadows were getting longer. Maya POV, late evening. I woke up to the sound of rain. It wasn't a gentle spring rain. It was a coastal storm, the wind howling against the stone walls and the water lashing at the windows. The room was dark, save for the dying embers in the fireplace. Alexander was gone from the bed. I sat up, wrapping the silk sheet around me. I saw him standing by the window again, silhouetted against the flash of lightning. He was wearing his trousers, his chest bare, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're awake," he said, not turning around. "I missed your heat." I got out of bed and walked over to him, leaning my head against his shoulder. "What are you looking at?" "The storm, it's coming in fast." He took a sip of the whiskey, his eyes fixed on the churning water below. "I got a message from Marcus while you were sleeping." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "And Vane has filed a countersuit. He's claiming that our audit was based on illegally obtained information. And he's leaked the Aunt Evelyn story to the national press. They're calling it a Shakespearean betrayal." "So the weekend is over," I said, my voice flat. "No." Alexander turned to me, his eyes dark with a lethal resolve. "The weekend is just beginning. I told Marcus to ignore the calls. I've shut down the servers for the Hamptons house. For the next 48 hours, the world doesn't exist." "Alexander, you can't just ignore a countersuit from a multi-billion-dollar firm." "I can do whatever I want, Maya. I'm the man who owns the room, remember." He set his glass down and took my hands, his grip firm. "Vane thinks he can lure me back to the city. He thinks he can use the scandal to distract me, but he doesn't realize that I've already made my move." "What move?" "I bought the debt on his primary laboratory in Singapore. By Monday morning, Julian Vane will find out that the building his scientists work in is owned by Blackwood Industries. He can sue me all he wants, but I have my boot on his throat." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of awe and terror. This was the man I loved, a man who played with lives like they were numbers on a ledger. He was brilliant, he was ruthless, and he was mine. But as I looked at the dark, stormy sea outside, I realized the truth. He wanted what he couldn't have, a life with me that wasn't touched by the fire. But he was the one who kept throwing wood on the flames. He couldn't help himself. Power was his language, and even here, at the end of the world, He was still speaking it. "Come back to bed, Alexander," I whispered. "In a minute." He pulled me closer, his lips grazing my forehead. "I just want to watch the storm for a little while longer. I want to remember what it feels like to be the only thing standing between you and the dark." Alexander POV 3:00 a.m. Maya was asleep again, her breathing steady and peaceful. I sat in the armchair by the fire, watching her. The whiskey was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Vane's countersuit was a nuisance. The press scandal was a distraction. I could handle both, but there was something Marcus had mentioned in the message that I hadn't told Maya. Caleb Thorne hadn't been seen since the meeting. He'd vanished from his apartment, his bank accounts had been cleared, and Julian Vane was claiming he'd never heard of him. A man like Caleb doesn't just disappear. He waits. He finds a new shadow to hide in. I looked at the Vigil of Justice statue I'd had moved to the foyer of this house, too. In the flickering firelight, the scales looked tilted. I wanted what I couldn't have. I wanted Maya to be safe. I wanted her to be far away from the wreckage of the Sterling legacy. But I knew that as long as she was with me, she was the target. She was the one thing my enemies could use to break me. I stood up and walked to the bed, sliding back under the sheets. She stirred, murmuring my name in her sleep, and moved closer to the heat of my body. I held her tight, my eyes fixed on the door. Act II had begun. The fire was burning. And as the storm raged outside, I realized that I would do more than just protect her. I would burn the entire world to the ground before I let anyone take her from me. But the question remained, would she still love me when all that was left was the ash? I closed my eyes, the sound of the rain drowning out the voices in my head. I had the woman, I had the power, I had the future. But as I drifted off to sleep, the ghost of Julian Vane's laughter echoed in the back of my mind. "He wants what he can't have," the voice whispered. Peace. Maya POV morning. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the world looking scrubbed and raw. The ocean was a brilliant, bruised blue, and the air was filled with the scent of wet stone and salt. I stood on the deck, wearing one of Alexander's white shirts, the sleeves rolled up past my elbows. I was watching a hawk circle the cliffs, its wings sharp against the clear sky. I felt Alexander step out behind me. He didn't say anything, but I felt the weight of his presence like a physical touch. He wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. "The servers are still down," he murmured. "I know. We have 36 hours left." I turned in his arms, looking up at him. He looked younger in the morning light. The tension in his jaw had softened, and his eyes were clear. "What do you want to do with them?" I asked. "I want to do nothing," he said, a surprising look of sincerity crossing his face. "I want to walk on the beach. I want to watch you read. I want to forget that I'm Alexander Blackwood." "You could never forget that." "I can try." He kissed my nose, a playful gesture that made me laugh. "Come on, the tide is out. Let's see what the storm brought in." We spent the day on the beach. We didn't talk about the board. We didn't talk about Vane. We talked about the things we'd missed during the years of the takeover, the books we'd read, the places we wanted to go, the dreams we'd buried under the weight of survival. For a few hours, it felt real. It felt like we were just a man and a woman building something beautiful in the sand. But as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, I saw a black SUV pulling into the long driveway at the top of the cliff. The world had found us. "Alexander," I said, pointing toward the house. He looked up, and I saw the mask of the CEO slide back into place instantly. The softness vanished. The youth disappeared. He became the Titan again, the man who owns the room. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice turning to ice. "I'm coming with you." Maya, I'm the senior advisor, remember? And I'm the woman who loves you. You don't face the world alone anymore. He looked at me for a long moment, the conflict visible in his eyes. Then he reached out and took my hand, his grip crushing. Fine, he said. Let's go see which ghost has come to call. Alexander POV. It wasn't Julian Vane. And it wasn't Marcus. As we reached the top of the cliff and walked toward the house, a woman stepped out of the black SUV. She was tall, elegant, with hair the color of spun silver and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the cliffs. She was wearing a tailored gray suit that screamed power, and she held a leather briefcase like a weapon. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Mother," I said, the word sounding like a curse. Eleanor Blackwood, the matriarch of the Blackwood Empire and the only person in the world I truly feared, looked at me with a cold, triumphant smile. "Alexander," she said, her voice like velvet-wrapped steel. "I heard you were having some difficulties with the board. I thought it was time. I came to see the woman who has managed to do what no rival CEO could." She looked at Maya, her eyes sweeping over her with a clinical, soul-crushing intensity. "So," Eleanor murmured, "this is the sterling girl. I must say, Alexander, your taste has improved, though I suspect your judgment has not." Maya stood her ground, her hand still gripped in mine. I felt her pulse racing, but she didn't flinch. "I'm Maya Sterling," she said, her voice clear and steady. "And you must be the woman Alexander told me never to trust." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. A slow, chilling laugh escaped her. "Oh, I like her. It's a shame I'm going to have to be the one to tell her that the Blackwood family doesn't do love, Alexander. We do alliances." She stepped closer, the salt air suddenly feeling like ice. "The board has called for a vote of no confidence, my son, and I'm the one who holds the deciding share." She looked at the house, then back at me. "He wants what he can't have, Maya," Eleanor said softly. "He wants a life with you, but he's a Blackwood, and a Blackwood always chooses the Empire." The fire of Act II hadn't just begun. It had just turned into an inferno. Next chapter, Chapter 17, The Business Trip.